The developer is building a new application that transforms text files to PDF files. A separate application writes the text files to a source S3 bucket. The new application must read the files as they arrive in S3 and must convert the files to PDF files by using a Lambda function. The developer has written an IAM policy to allow access to S3 and CloudWatch logs. What should the developer do to ensure that the Lambda function has the correct permissions? Create a Lambda execution role by using IAM. Attach the IAM policy to the role. Assign the Lambda execution role to the Lambda function. Create a Lambda execution user by using IAM. Attach the IAM policy to the user. Assign the Lambda execution user to the Lambda function. Create a Lambda execution role by using IAM. Attach the IAM policy to the role. Store the IAM role as an environment variable in the Lambda function. Create a Lambda execution user by using IAM. Attach the IAM policy to the user. Store the IAM user credentials as environment variables in the Lambda function. Okay. Create a Lambda execution role by using IAM. Attach the IAM policy to the role. Assign the Lambda execution role to the Lambda function. Okay. Lambda are designed specifically for granting permissions to Lambda functions to interact with AWS services like S3 and CloudWatch logs. Okay. All right, a developer is working on an application that stores highly confidential data in a database. The developer must use KMS with envelope encryption to protect the data. How should the developer configure the data encryption to meet these requirements? Encrypt the data by using a KMS key. Store the encrypted data in the database. Encrypt the data by using a generated data key. Store the encrypted data in the database. Encrypt the data by using a generated data key. Store the encrypted data and the data key ID in the database. Encrypt the data by using a generated data key. Store the encrypted data and the encrypted data key in the database. Okay, encrypt the data by using a generated data key. Store the encrypted data and the encrypted data key in the database. And that tells us what envelope encryption is. Yeah, and you can't store just the data key ID because that could be a risk. Okay. All right, here we go. A developer is adding Elasticache from Memcache to a company's existing record storage application. The developer has decided to use lazy loading based on an analysis of common record handling patterns. Which pseudocode example will correctly implement lazy loading? So here we go. Take a couple of minutes. Okay. So record value, but the key is if record value equals null, because the point is with lazy loading, you don't load until the record is needed, and the application first checks the cache for a record. So that's if record value equals null. A developer is building a web application that uses API gateway. The developer wants to maintain different environments for development and production workloads. The API will be backed by a Lambda function with two aliases, one for dev and one. How can the developer maintain these environments with the least amount of configuration? Okay, create a REST API for each environment. Integrate the APIs with the corresponding dev and prod aliases of the Lambda function. Deploy the APIs to their respective stages. Access the APIs by using the stage URLs. Create one REST API, integrate the API with the Lambda function by using a stage variable in place of an alias. Deploy the API in two different stages, dev and prod. Create a stage variable in each stage with different aliases as the value. Access the API by using the different stage URLs. Create one REST API. Integrate the API with the dev alias of the Lambda function. Deploy the API to the dev environment. Configure a Canary release deployment for the prod environment where the Canary will integrate with the Lambda production alias. Create one REST API, integrate the API with the prod alias of the Lambda function. Deploy the API to the production environment. Configure a Canary release deployment for the dev environment where the Canary will integrate with the Lambda dev alias. Okay, so it's create one REST API, integrate the API with the Lambda function by using a stage variable in place of an alias. Deploy the API to two different stages, dev and prod. Create a stage variable in each stage with different aliases as the values. Access the API by using the different stage URLs. The stage variables will hold the alias value, which might represent different configs, but endpoints are lambda. Okay, that kind of makes sense. Okay, that's it. Perfect.